Someone asked me this question earlier. They said, hey Max, do you think doing higher keys equals better raid performance? Does it make you a better raider? Our guild really only does 10s, and I was curious if pushing that content actually helps raid performance. Usually people ask, does like doing keys make you better in raid? And the answer is yes, because you're basically... So like actively doing keys and actively raiding is the same thing. You're pressing your buttons in a certain order while like paying attention to the things around you that are trying to kill you. And the more you do that in any aspect, you will get better at that, which is 95% of raiding in Mythic Plus, right? So like why Mythic Plus makes you better at raiding is you can just kind of spam it more than you can raid. I guess the higher keys, the more dangerous things are. So the better you have to play, the higher the standard. So yes, you will get better at that, which will also make that standard higher in raid, and you'll get better. But yeah, just doing PvE more will make you better at PvE. But your question was a little different. If I want to get better at raid, should I just spam plus 10s or should I do higher keys? I mean, it's definitely just doing higher keys. Because like you get it like the lower keys you do, like the stuff dies too fast. You can't like do your whole damage rotation. But also I imagine like that's not true for some people. If you're not very good, right? If you have like the best group ever, they're going to make a 10 look super easy. But if you're like super average, maybe a 10 does last pretty long because you're not doing a lot of damage, right? I don't know. You should probably just do the most amount of things that feel challenging to you, whatever that number is. You don't need to focus on what number it is. PvP makes you better at your class. To some extent, yeah. Like, if you want to get better at PvE, if I was a doctor and I was prescribing you medicine to make you better at PvE, I would prescribe you an infinite amount of gameplay in, like, Mythic Plus or Raid, like PvE things. And I would never be like, you should PvP to understand your class better. I think every minute spent in PvE is more valuable than PvP when you want to get better at PvE. But I don't think that, like, that time is irrelevant. You'll definitely get a little better. But I think if you spent that time in PvE, you'd be getting more better. PvP and PvE, very different skill sets. We're like, that's not true. It's like somewhat linked. It's just why you need to use your defensives is something you get used to in PvE, and it's a totally different reason in PvP. Like, you don't learn how to use your defensives better in PvP because in PvP, you don't even want to use your defensives like on cooldown when you're taking a ton of damage. There's like you like go through a list of things, like your healer has defensives for you and stuff. You need to be aware of that. And like a lot of those skills are PvP specific, you know. PvP helps you learn your class more and getting used to using your abilities under pressure. It's not directly transferable, but does help you learn your class. Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm just thinking because like I did PvP some in WoW, and like maybe I'm just like underrating that time that made me better. Like I don't know, like let's say you're not used to using Ring of Peace, but you use it a few times and you like in PvE and you get it. Same thing with like Disable and stuff like that. I would say like maybe in like the race it's good to have some PvP experience because like if you're in another guild and you're going into a boss, you would know that you would need to paralyze or do some kind of like dream walk or some weird shit to this ad because you saw a video of someone doing it. But like we're the people who are in the videos, right? So like to come up with some kind of unique things, you kind of need to know like your entire class's toolkit and what you're capable of doing. But I think it becomes less important the more you have like actual like examples of it happening. Max, I legitimately got better at WoW after I spent 2 months playing Final Fantasy. My positioning and awareness on where to stand translates to WoW insanely. Oh, I actually had a similar experience. So did Roger. So like Roger and I both played Final Fantasy for a little bit. And by figuring out how those fights worked, it definitely changed the way that both of us strategized WoW fights. For me, at least, in the way of being symmetrical. Like in Final Fantasy, there is a like prescribed solution to like all these mechanics. You just have to figure out how they work. But usually the best way to do that is to have the thinking be as simplistic and as symmetrical as possible with other people in the room. And you can make everything like kind of, you can solve it a bunch of different ways, but the best way is when it looks the easiest to understand, which usually is the easiest to understand. And then I definitely applied that to WoW stuff. Like there's actually been bosses I've been frustrated with in WoW that I wouldn't have been frustrated with in the past. Cause I'm like, there's no perfect, they're usually early bosses. It's like, there's no perfect solution for positioning here, right? But you know, it doesn't need to be. Like it's an early boss and that's totally fine. But the fact that it isn't like this perfectly symmetrical, there's always a very clear logic chain into like how you make a decision. It's just more YOLO'd. Because they can design fights where they want you to kind of YOLO it and not have it be designed and solved, you know? But like after doing Final Fantasy, you feel like you want to make every strat feel like that. I think playing all video games makes you better at video games too. Yeah. But then like example of Rashinan. Like, Rashinan was a fight where we basically had no strategy for it. It was just like, I don't know, kind of do heroic. The last time we saw this on testing, it just seemed like heroic but harder. And then they just sped the boss up by 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you're just, like, literally chasing the boss for 6 minutes. And we just were, like 30 seconds into that boss, we're just like, fucking figure it out. Just go run after the boss and figure it out. And we did. I actually think it's really surprising that we one-shot Rashinan. Like, very surprised that happened. I was, like... It's not a hard boss, so maybe not a lot of people would recognize it, but I think the ability for our players to one-shot that boss with it being like fully reacting to a completely new boss was pretty impressive, in my opinion.